So welcome, good morning. This is Matt Cervantes with Sierra Health Foundation and the Center. We're really excited to bring to you the My Brother's Keepers Sacramento Mentoring Program Proposers webinar. This has been really, almost a year and a half in the making. It was just last fall that the Obama Foundation awarded the Center as the backbone of the My Brother's Keepers Sacramento Collaborative, this grant and regranting opportunity. So we want to acknowledge the partnership between Sierra Health Foundation, the Obama Foundation, and the Center at Sierra Health Foundation as funders, as well as the the sort of collaboration that is bringing you this funding opportunity. Of course, we're led by our partners, our community partners who are part of the My Brother's Keepers Sacramento Collaborative, who are very much part of this movement to support boys and men of color in Sacramento. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just introduce myself. I serve as the Director of Health Programs for both Sierra Health Foundation and the Center, and then also want to open the line up for our team back in Sacramento to introduce themselves, right? Okay, so this is what we plan to cover today. Just know that we'll go in depth in very detailed manner of the RFP, the details, what you need to be considering as you put together your application. We're going to go through the process of how to apply, and then also to talk about how to be competitive with your application. So just know that all these details will be covered throughout today's session. Okay, the next slide is just some background on the Center at Sierra Health Foundation. The Center is about 7 years old now. Sierra Health Foundation initiated this, what we like to call our sister organization, to help deepen our impact throughout the state to address health disparities by looking really at root causes, the health inequities that exist throughout our communities. And we do this, collectively, really through a collective impact model, and the MBK Sacramento Collaborative is a really good example of how we serve as a backbone to a community-driven collaborative. And we'll talk a little bit about the individual programs within the Center, but the Center has extended our reach across the state and also helping catalyze partnerships, whether they're public-private or, in this case, another philanthropic partner in the Obama Foundation. Next slide. So as mentioned, here are the diverse and expansive programs that fall within the Center: the Build Black Coalition, the California Funders for Boys and Men of Color, Leadership Development for Racial Equity, the Medication-Assisted Treatment Access Points Project, and then My Brother's Keepers Sacramento Collaborative, which is why we're all here today, the Positive Youth Justice Initiative, the San Joaquin Valley Health Fund, and the Steering Committee on the Reduction of African American Child Deaths, or the Black Child Legacy Campaign. These are all examples of kind of working in partnership, whether it's public-private, like the Black Child Legacy Campaign and the Medication-Assisted Treatment Access Points Project, or from a philanthropic perspective, like the Positive Youth Justice Initiative or My Brother's Keepers Sacramento Collaborative. Really have a strong policy and a policy focus within all of these programs to address those kind of systemic barriers that communities of color are facing throughout the state that really keep communities from achieving those healthy outcomes that we're all seeking. So just some examples of our programs. With that, I will turn the mic over to Ray to talk today a little bit about the MBK Sacramento Mentoring Program funding opportunity. Ray.
All right, we had some technical difficulties there. Can everyone hear me now? Someone can reply. All right. So I'll go briefly over. We want to welcome you again. My name is Ray Green. I'm the My Brothers Keeper Sacramento coordinator here. And today's call is going over the My Brothers Keeper Sacramento mentoring program funding opportunity. So I'll gladly go over that for those who are on the call. The funding partnership that we have is through the Obama Foundation, which we're really excited about, as well as the Sierra Health Foundation. Those are our funding partners for this grant. And the funding goal of this mentoring program is really to build capacity for community-based nonprofit organizations that meet the needs of youth, build agency and youth leadership development through healthy and supportive mentorship for young men of color in Sacramento with caring adults. I'm going to briefly go over the background, just discussing the diversity of Sacramento region, how we got here, as well as the My Brothers Keeper Sacramento. So as many of you know or may not know, Sacramento is considered one of the most diverse cities in the nation, and its richness in culture and perspectives lead to these great opportunities for social cohesion and innovation for economic and social improvement. However, with these great strengths also come great challenges to meet those diverse needs of the residents, particularly boys and young men of color. And for many years, we know there's been many community leaders, organizations who have worked to reduce the disparities that boys and young men of color face by promoting and achieving policy and system level change. But we know that there's much to be done. So in 2014, President Obama put out a My Brothers Keeper Community Challenge. And it was really in response to the incident that happened and the murder that happened of Trayvon Martin. And Sacramento, being the leaders that we are, we answered the call, and the My Brothers Keeper Sacramento Collaborative was founded to bring system leaders, advocates, community partners, youth-serving organizations, and young people together to address these health, educational, employment, and justice system disparities for young men of color through policy advocacy, system change, and support for effective programming. Now, that My Brothers Keeper Sacramento Collaborative still exists today. We were funded by the Obama Foundation. They awarded funding to the MBK Sacramento to expand our model of violence prevention and mentoring. And as we expand mentoring programs, it's to expand quality mentoring programs for boys and young men of color throughout Sacramento County. The center, we serve as the backbone organization focusing on the collective action and cross-sector task force to identify the gaps and assets and develop recommendations that support that mission and the MBK Sacramento Collaborative. So that was just a brief background. I'm now going to get into the eligibility for those who are on the call. We want to ensure that in order to be eligible for these funds, you must be a 501c3 nonprofit organization or have a 501c3 fiscal sponsor. There should only be one application per organization. The applicant organization must serve the residents living in Sacramento, as well as making sure, as we continue on with the eligibility, the center here seeks proposals for mentorship efforts throughout Sacramento County, but I want to bring in special attention to these 6 neighborhoods: Arden Arcade, Del Paso Heights, North Sacramento, North Highland Foothill Farms, Oak Park, Valley High, and Meadowview. So those will be the 6 that we are looking just with some special attention to serve. Now getting into the funding scope, this is up to $100,000 in total that will be available for these mentorship opportunities, and the individual grants and the individual organizations can actually apply up to $10,000 per organization. Now, this grant cycle will actually be a 12-month grant period, which will occur from January to December of 2020, and we'll go over more about that just in a few moments. But I want to go over now what we will fund and what we will not fund. So on to the next slide for what we will fund. We will fund spokesperson trainings, and these are not limited to just these examples, but just to name a few that's written out in the RFP. Spokesperson trainings, engaging community stakeholders, staff or board trainings, assessment tools and training materials for mentorship programs, staff time, consultants, youth and adult stipends, meeting space, food, AV costs, technology, and travel. And for the project approach for things that we will fund, some examples of that will be youth engagement, organizing and advocacy, peer learning, coalition building, partnership development, policy development, leadership development, community engagement, organizing and advocacy, research, and we encourage participatory action research as well with the youth, multi-ethnic, multiracial collaboration, communications, outreach, and education. So those are just a few of the things that we will fund as well as in the project approach. Now I'm going to discuss some of the things that we will not fund with these funds. Debt retirement or operational deficits, partisan activities, individuals as applicants, religious organizations for explicit religious activities, activities that exclusively benefit the members of sectarian or religious organizations, 509(a)(3) supporting organizations, and 501(c)(4) organizations or lobbying organizations. So for those who will be selected through this process, there will be meetings as well as trainings. Those funded organizations will be required to participate in 3 MBK Sacramento Mentoring Institute meetings, which will be given out later once those have received the selection to be the MBK mentors, which will be scheduled throughout the grant period. They will also be expected to participate in assessment of mentoring programs as well as included trainings. We're going to pause. I know that was a lot. We're going to pause. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to KCN and Matt to go over any questions.
Thanks, Ray. And just to say thank you, everyone, for our technical issues earlier. We did not get to do our introductions properly since our mic was not working. So we're going to actually go back to our introduction slide before we go into question and answers so that everyone on the phone as well as on the webinar knows who is speaking. So my name is KCN Carbonell. I am a program associate here at Sierra Health Foundation and the Center. I support in a variety of programs, and one of them being My Brother's Keeper Sacramento.
My name is Ray Green. As mentioned earlier, I serve as the My Brother's Keeper Sacramento coordinator, working over all things My Brother's Keeper, and so excited to have each of you on this call to expand mentoring programs here in Sacramento.
And as mentioned, Matt Cervantes serves as the Director of Health Programs for Sierra Health Foundation and the Center. Thanks all for bearing with us with these technical glitches, and echo the comments that we're excited to bring this opportunity to our partners here in the city.
Okay, so now going back to the Q&A section, we will be covering any questions submitted through the chat box on any sections that we've already covered so far. And right now, I'm going to read off some common questions that we're getting is, is this webinar recorded, and will these slides be available after the webinar? And to answer that very quickly, yes, we are recording, and we will be uploading it onto the MBK Sacramento webpage following this webinar. Another question we have is, would youth mentoring be a fundable program focus?
I think that is an eligible. We'll go over some of the criteria, but I would encourage you to read the RFP and the application guidelines. But yes, in short, youth mentoring is an eligible activity.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And those are the questions we've received so far. So we are going to move forward in our presentation, and we will have other Q&A sections later on. Oh, we have one more. Can neighborhoods collaborate?
Good question. Absolutely. I mean, if there are ways that you all want to look at how to collaborate, I think what Ray was describing and what we had committed to through the Obama Foundation application process was kind of deepening the investment in the 6 neighborhoods that were identified. And so we encourage collaboration where it makes sense. It's not a mandate. It's not a requirement, but would certainly encourage collaboration where it makes sense for our partners.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So we'll move forward now. So now I will walk you through the Center's Grants portal for this application process. The Center's Grants portal is where applicants fill out and submit an application, and then we'll go over the contents of the application itself. When you're ready to access the Grants portal, use the link you see on the slide. The link is also posted on the MBK Sacramento page of the Center's website and in the request for proposals, which is also posted on the page, shfcenter.org/mbk-sac. A few words about online browsers. If you work on a PC, be sure to use Internet Explorer as your web browser for the portal, and use Safari if you work on a Mac. The portal doesn't function properly in other browsers. If you haven't used the Center's Grants portal before, you first need to create an account. Just under the email field on the login page is a button circled in red on the slide labeled New Applicant. Click this button to create an account. If you already have an account on the Center's Grants portal, simply enter your email address and password to log in. New applicant doesn't mean new to applying to the center. It means new applying on the Center's online grants portal. So even if you've applied for a grant to the center in the past, if you have not used your online portal, you need to click on the New Applicant button and set up an account. Also note that this portal is for applications to the center. Sierra Health Foundation has its own portal. If you have applied for a grant on Sierra Health Foundation's portal but not on the center's, you are a new applicant for this funding opportunity. Once you're logged in, you'll be prompted to enter the applicant organization's federal tax exempt ID number. The system will check the number against the IRS database. Then you'll be prompted to indicate whether or not the applicant organization is a 501c3 nonprofit. Applicant organizations must be a 501c3 to continue to the application. In the application, you'll see dark purple and light purple tabs about 1/3 of the way down that correspond to the sections of the application. You can move back and forth from tab to tab by clicking on a tab or by clicking on the next button at the bottom or top of the page. You save your application and come back to it later by clicking on the Save and Finish Later button. When you save and finish later, you will receive an automated email with a link to return to your in-progress application. It's important to use this link each time you return to your in-progress application. If you use the initial link from the request for proposals and the web page, you won't see your in-progress application. The system will think you're starting a new application. Also, be sure to click Save and Finish Later if you will not be working in the application for a few minutes. Next, the team and I will briefly go over the contents of each tab. The tab you're working in will be dark purple. As you can see in the screenshot on the slide, the Instructions tab appears first on the left. Please do read the instructions. One thing to note is that required fields are marked with a red asterisk. You won't be able to submit your application until all required fields are filled in and required attachments are uploaded. Next is the Applicant Information tab. In this section, you are asked for the standard organization information, address, phone, website, and if the applicant is applying as a fiscal sponsor on behalf of another organization. Then we ask for contact information for the applicant organization's CEO/director. And then for questions that may come up regarding the proposal, we ask for a project contact. This can be the CEO or director or a person who is more familiar with the proposal. The next tab is Project Summary. Here we ask for the project name and a brief purpose of the project. The name is limited to 20 words and the purpose is limited to 100 words. Please pay attention to the word limits. The amount requested can be up to $10,000. Apply for the amount that makes sense for the activities you are proposing. We also want to know about the geography and population your organization benefits. For population, indicate race or ethnicity by percentage and age groups by percentage. This would be your best estimate. Now we'll move on to the project narrative tab contents, and I'll hand it over to Matt and Ray, who will go over this.
Thanks, Casey Ann. So I'll be covering the questions for the project narrative. This is also found in your RFP, but if you want to follow on the slides as well, that would be great. The organization description. Here we want you to provide a brief overview of your organization, when it was established, your organization's mission, its youth focus, and its work to reduce health disparities and address racial equity. Lastly, within this part, we also want to make sure that the ethnic makeup of your organization's executive staff and board. So please just provide that as well, so we can get a good understanding of your project or program narrative. Moving on the application, questions for project narrative under the organization's description. We would ask that you provide a brief overview of your organization, as well, including whom you benefit, including their demographic characteristics such as age, gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, circumstances of the geographic setting or neighborhood, as well as including the types of program you currently operate. Examples of notable success in your organization's work with youth should also be filled out and submitted. And if the applicant is acting as a fiscal sponsor, please provide some information about the applicant and more detail about the entity that will carry out the project for this mentoring. Keep in mind the maximum words will be 300 words, so please be clear and please be concise. Moving forward to the project narrative under the organization experience. Describe your organization's experience working with boys and young men of color in the city and county of Sacramento. This can include demonstrated major contributions to one or more local efforts such as mentoring recruitment, training or program expansion, youth violence prevention, developing cross-sector partnerships in support of boys and young men of color, or among other possibilities. And the maximum for this section will be 200 words. I'm going to transition to Matt so he can talk a little bit about the MBK Sacramento network.
Thanks, Ray. So in this next question, in the narrative, it's focused on MBK Sacramento. And we'd like to know in this question to describe how your organization has worked with or intends to work with aspects of the MBK Sacramento network. These can include, but are not limited to, the MBK Sacramento Coordinating Committee, the MBK strategy teams, which include health, education, workforce, or juvenile justice, community safety. So one thing just to accentuate here is that it is not a requirement that you be part of the MBK Sacramento network now, but certainly we want to find ways to collaborate with MBK Sacramento, as this is a funding opportunity that it falls within the MBK Sacramento purview. So if you aren't part of that network, that's fine. Learn more about it if you go to the center's website, shfcenter.org, and click on the MBK Sacramento tab. Learn more about that network and see how you could plug in, and then this is an area where you can describe how you will become active within the network. If you are an MBK Sacramento partner currently, describe, how you've been a part of it and how you will participate in the future. I would pay particular attention to detail about how you will be linking activities to the MBK Sacramento network. In this particular question, you have a maximum of 200 words, so as Ray said, be clear and concise. So the next question is the project description. So please describe the mentorship program or intervention you are proposing. Include how each of the mentoring components listed in the RFP are incorporated in the program. At a minimum, include key program features, theory of change, why it is innovative, demographics of boys and young men of color that you serve or will be serving, evidence of impact on the target population, and in which communities the program is currently operating. So we want to get a sense of the young people you're serving currently and the geographic neighborhoods the program is currently operating. Another piece that I think is worth highlighting is, and with this question can come up in some of our other grant-making programs, is what, the definition of innovative. We want to know why you think the program is innovative. We don't have a defined approach when it comes to innovation, but we want to hear how you feel it really your program design is innovative for the young people that you serve. Given the kind of expansive question here, we've allocated 400 words for this, which still requires being concise, but a little more space to describe all that is being requested. Next slide. All right, the next question is around social justice youth development. The question is, how have you or will you include social justice youth development within your mentorship program? And I'd like to just reference the RFP, and there is a citation on page 3 of Dr. Sean Ginwright and Julio Camarota, The New Terrain in Youth Development, the Promise of a Social Justice Approach. And, the way we've seen social justice, youth development being applied in practice is really looking at young people as more than simply recipients of service, but that they have the agency and just require additional support and guidance to impacting the conditions that are found within their neighborhoods, within their communities that impact their peers, siblings, families, and family members. That young people, given the guidance and support and recognition that there are systemic barriers to the opportunities that we want all young people to have, and to address those barriers, young people certainly can play a major role in addressing those. And this kind of gets us at our increasingly focused attention towards policy and systems change that Ray described earlier, and making sure that young people are part of this movement around boys and men of color, and really addressing some of those systemic issues that we know exist. In this area, you have a maximum space of 200 words. Next slide. All right, and a major requirement of mentorship programs is recruitment of mentors. So please describe how you will recruit mentors and mentees. How will you screen mentors to ensure safety for our young people? And how will you match mentees with mentors? You have likely developed some protocols and practices that work for your program, and this is your opportunity to describe those in a maximum of 200 words. All right, I will pass the mic over to Ray, who will speak to the next questions.
Thank you, Matt. So I'll be going over some of the expected outcomes. This is your opportunity to describe any anticipated outcomes of the program or the intervention, If you happen to be replicating or scaling up a program, please describe the existing evidence of effectiveness that makes it worth replicating or scaling. Here, we're really just wanting to know what it is that you want to do. We didn't want to put a specific box around what type of outcomes should be had from your mentor, because we do want a variety of mentoring opportunities, but providing some great outcomes for those young boys and men of color. In this section, there will be a maximum of 300 words, so please, again, be clear, be concise. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it back over to Matt just around the questions for the project narrative for the evaluation process.
Thanks, Ray. So the next question is around evaluation and data collection, and asks, describe how you will document or evaluate progress toward the outcomes that you've identified. This is we want to recognize and just be honest and real that these aren't large grants, so we're not expecting comprehensive evaluation plans, but knowing that you all have a great interest in documenting the kind of impact, you likely have quantitative and qualitative data collection measures in place already. So we want to link those evaluation activities and with the kind of outcomes that you've stated you're seeking for our boys and young men of color. So this is your opportunity to describe some of those areas. You may have more robust evaluation measures in place, and that's great, but we recognize that for this grant, there isn't an expectation to do a full-blown evaluation, but we do want to understand how you're collecting data related to the outcomes you've described. And this question has a maximum of 200 words. And I will turn it over to Casey Ann, who's going to lead us through the next section.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, so now, everyone, I'll be going over the application attachments. In the attachment tabs of the application on the portal, you'll see places to upload specific required documents. You will not be able to submit your application until you have uploaded all required documents. And these include the project budget and narrative. A form is provided via a link on the attachments page. You will download it, fill it out, and upload the completed form. Please do not use your own form. I'll go over the budget form more in depth in a minute. You will also be required to upload your IRS 501c3 letter. And all applicants are required to upload a financial statement showing revenue and expenses for the organization's most recent full fiscal year. If your organization has been in existence less than a year, submit a financial statement from the time your organization has been in existence. And please do not submit your organization's IRS Form 990. That's not what we're looking for. On the slide, you'll see a screenshot of the grants portal. This is the attachments tab. And so, as I mentioned, you will download the budget form in the attachments tab of the application in the proposed budget section of the attachment tabs. There is a sentence that says, please download our proposed budget form here. It's a little difficult to tell, but the word here is hyperlinked to the budget form. So now I'll go over in depth the budget form. Starting from left to right, on the far left is the line items column. In the top section, enter any staff that are part of the project by title. In the lower section, we've provided many common line items for you and also some miscellaneous lines for other items not already listed, and also consultants. Note that you may request indirect costs up to 15% of direct costs. Next to that is where you will enter the amount you are requesting from the center for that line. If what you are requesting is the total budget, the column and the total project budget column will be the same. In the right-hand column, if you have other funding committed to the project, those funding amounts go here. Note that this column is for committed funding, not pending applications or what you hope to raise, but what has already been awarded. And in the furthest right-hand column, you will enter a brief description of the funds and how they will be used. That's the narrative part of this budget form. And 1 second while I advance the slide. Sorry, everyone. Give us a second. Okay, we seem to have encountered another technical issue. Our slides are not advancing.
Lucianne,
Yes?
try to click on the actual screenshot and then use the arrow on the there we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh. Okay, so here we are, and this slide just tells you what I just went over. List each line item, identify other funding secured for the proposed activities if applicable, and in the budget narrative column, you'll describe the purpose of each line item. Okay, so now we have another Q&A section. We will answer questions that we received on the sections we've covered so far. And some questions I see, or one question I see is that you're having issues with the app and the slides aren't showing up. So we apologize for that. We don't know why it's not showing up on the app, but just to reiterate that this recording and the slides will be available after the webinar on the MBK Sacramento webpage. Someone also asked if we could spot the link to the portal once more. The portal link is on our MBK Sacramento page, and you could find this page at shfcenter.org/mbk-sac. So the portal link is posted and also available.
It's also worth noting that I was just going to mention that there, within the actual RFP itself, I believe there is a hyperlink if you're looking at it on your computer to the portal as well.
Yes, thanks, Matt. And then one question we have is there a goal/target number for how many participants to reach? They see percentages listed on the questions.
So I can take that on. This is Ray Green. So on that specific question, it is asking percentages just around the ages and maybe some of the demographics of youth that you are serving. However, there is not a direct goal or target that we have set here at the center. But we are asking you to be mindful of quality relationships as you are building those out and planning out whatever model you choose to use, whether that's a small group, whether that's a large group, or even a team-style mentoring model, which we found works as well due to the lack of mentors. But just please be mindful of the quality, deep, transformative relationships that you desire to see and that will fit your program. We know that everyone has a different capacity, and as we expand those, we just want to make sure that that's reflected, or you should make sure that that's reflected within your application. But that was a great question.
Okay, and that's all the questions we received so far. So now we'll move on to how to be competitive. And Matt, take it away.
Thanks, Casey-Ann. And just, just to reiterate that all the information we're presenting today is available on the RFP itself. So, and that is available for download on the website. but just know that we're going to be covering the criteria in which the applications will be assessed. So just know that these are also listed in that request for proposals. All right, the first one, describe the connection to or ways the organization plans to connect its work to MBK Sacramento Collaborative, Black Child Legacy Campaign, Healing the Hood, or the Positive Youth Justice Initiative. And these programs in particular were communicated to the Obama Foundation in our application. It's kind of creating what we've often described as the environment or the context for deep systemic reform and direct service to support and reduce young men who are most at risk of gun violence or community violence, and to deepen our investments in the 6 neighborhoods where that we know that is most prevalent. So please communicate that in your application so that it can be addressed during the assessment process. And the next criterion, describe the anticipated difference the project would make as explained in your stated outcomes. Moving to the next slide, describe the existing evidence of effectiveness that makes the program or activities worth replicating or scaling up. We all know that you have documented success with young people, and make sure that's included in the narrative that you submit. Next criterion is include a reasonable scope and budget. There you go. Include a reasonable scope and budget based on this funding opportunities framework. So just please review that RFP in detail, and then make sure that you design a budget that will support the kind of programming that we're seeking through this funding opportunity. The next criterion, identify plans to leverage social and financial resources to deepen impact. So this is really making sure that if you are leveraging other funding sources, that is communicated. And when we described the budget form, there was some lines to communicate that, and that's really where you should locate that kind of information. Next slide. So there's the selection criteria, and those are really, really important. They will drive the decision making. But these are other considerations when we're reviewing the overall cohort of grantee partners, of funded partners. And that's the geographic diversity, recognizing that we have at least, we have the 6 neighborhoods that we're focusing on, so we want to make sure there's a geographic representation. Also the demographic diversity. We know, as Ray mentioned, that Sacramento is one of the most diverse communities in our country. So we want to see that kind of demographic diversity as well. You all have the power of diversity doesn't stop with just our young people. We know that you're innovating, you are creating diverse and unique programs that serve boys and young men of color. And we want to see that full range of projects within the funded cohort. So know that is also a consideration, is the diversity of approaches and perspectives when it comes to mentoring programs. And then another factor is previous MBK Sacramento funding. As we talked about, Sierra Health Foundation has been funding the MBK Sacramento Collaborative with some resources, and so that will just be another consideration as we assess the overall cohort of funded partners.
All right, so before we actually go into the proposal writing tips, I'm going to go back a few slides for one of the selection criteria that I believe we may have missed, just to go over that so everyone is aware of that as well. And it says that to make the case for your organization's interest and readiness to engage in mentoring boys and men of color in Sacramento. We've talked about that. Many of you are doing phenomenal work already, but we really are going to be making selections on not just the interest, but your readiness to engage mentoring of boys and young men of color. And when we say young men of color, it is outlined under the target impact in the RFP. That focus can include African American, Latinx or Hispanic, Native American, Asian American, and Pacific Islanders, and any other communities that we have not mentioned. So make that case of your readiness to engage. Also, we'll be making our selection on the criteria of describing your organization's experience working with boys and young men of color and related successful outcomes. Again, many of you are already doing amazing work, and we look forward to seeing that experience reflected in your application as you state your successful outcomes that you've had. Describe the process for recruiting, screening, and matching mentors and mentees. This is important. It's one of the top elements in mentoring, which those will be selected, we'll also see, but it's very, very important to really explain how you recruit. We talked a little bit about safety, and I know many of them have a lot of different processes of how they actually select the mentors, but we want to make sure that the mentors understand if it's on a volunteer basis or if it's on a paid basis, to understand that the positive experiences that you want the youth to have. And we do ask that as an organization, program staff consider your own program's mission and goals with that and the youth being served. And depending on the nature of the offenses described in the record of the potential mentor, we're leaving that up to you to decide that match and ensure that that is a safe and beneficial for the young person. And those should be decisions made on a case-by-case basis with the safety and the security of youth in mind at all times, as well as going into the matching of the mentors. There's many different ways to match mentors due to peer, diverse groups with multiple perspectives, and then large group mentoring styles. So we look forward to making those selection criteria as you do describe that and outline that out within the application. So moving forward, as I talk about the proposed writing tips, I want to make sure that you all know that there was and will be a proposal writing tip document that is posted on the MBK Sacramento page of the center's website. So I encourage you all to read through it, but I'll be just going over a few of those highlights. So first and foremost, and most important, we want to make sure that you read and follow the application guidelines and instructions. The guidelines and instructions document, again, will also be posted on the website, so you can view that after this call. Second, we want to be sure that your organization is eligible. We went over eligibility criteria earlier, so please revisit that. If you have any questions later on, we'll tell you how you can send those questions pertaining to the RFP to us, but they're also in the guidelines and instructions as well. In your narrative section, clearly explain your answers. As you've heard, there's multiple word ranges that are offered for each section. So the application reviewers need to be able to understand what specifically you are proposing, how you will accomplish it, and that your organization has the capacity to carry it out. Be sure that the proposed use of funds, your budget narrative, and budget line items are also consistent and that they make sense to the proposed budget. It should fit what you are proposing to do. So I did want to make that point as well. Moving forward, and it's also a good helpful hint to have someone who's not involved on the project read your draft application and tell you what they think you're applying for. Sometimes the application writer is so close to the work, they know what it means, but others may not be able to grasp what that means. So think of that as well as you move forward and include applicants, reviewers, because we may not understand what you may mean. So that extra input can be very, very valuable. Also, don't assume that the application reviewers will know anything about your organization and the work that you're doing. So please try to include that as well. Before I move on to the next slide, we are going to make sure that you hear from Casey Ann as she goes over some of the application submission tips, as well as the attachment checklist that you should remember to review.
Okay, so now I'm going to go over some submission tips for your application. I said this earlier, but on a PC, be sure to use Internet Explorer as the web browser for our online grants portal, and use Safari as the web browser on a Mac. The portal doesn't work well with other browsers such as Chrome. Click the Save and Return Later button if you will not be active in the application. You want to make sure that all of your responses are saved. Return to your application using the link in the automated email that you will receive. Because if you try to use the original link, it won't find your saved application and you'll have to start over. We advise that you submit this application before the deadline date. In case there happens to be technical glitches, we most likely will not be able to help you troubleshoot on the deadline date. So the earlier the better in case of any issues that you run into. Another tip is you can write your responses to the narrative questions outside of the grants portal, then cut and paste your responses in the appropriate fields. This has a couple benefits. One, it's easier to write in word processing software. Also, this will minimize the chances that the online portal will time out in the event you are pulled away from your computer while you're composing your application. And as you write your responses, remember to track your word count. If you are not familiar with how to do this, if you're using Microsoft Word, click Review at the top, and in the toolbar, click Word Count. And next, we have on the slide is a quick checklist that we want to go over with you all again. So remember to review your application instructions and criteria. Complete the application through the online portal, and this will include completing your application questions, completing the budget and narrative form, submitting the 501c3 determination letter, and submitting the most recent annual financial statement that shows revenue and expenses for a full year. So whenever in doubt, come back to this checklist to make sure that you have everything you need to apply. Next, Ray will go over the timeline for you.
Thanks, Casey Ann. So I will be going over when is this application actually due. Outlined in the RFP, you will see that the application deadline is November 21st at 1 p.m. This will give us the opportune time in our timeline to review and make those selections so that we can make the award announcement towards mid to late December, as well as having all of those selected organizations and funding to be available in January. So really quickly again, the application deadline is November 21st at 1 p.m. and you can submit that the same way that Casey Ann just went over. The award announcement will be in late December and the funds will be available for those selected organizations in January. All right, now on to the contacts and resources. If you happen to have any questions that weren't answered or you happen to have any after the call, you can feel free to email your questions to centergrants@shfcenter.org. And we're asking that you include the subject line MBK Sacramento RFP question. That will let us know that it's an MBK Sacramento related question. So again, that subject line is MBK Sacramento RFP question, and that can be submitted to the centergrants@shfcenter.org. For resources, specifically to learn more about the center and some of our programs, you can visit www.shfcenter.org. For questions or just more context on My Brother's Keeper or even just on the Obama Foundation itself, you can also visit www.obama.org. For any other context questions or just concerns or anything that you may want to find interest on anything surrounding Sierra Health Foundation, you can always visit www.sierrahealth.org. We're going to go ahead now to this section of questions and answers, so you can go ahead and submit that to the chat if you would like.
So we don't have any more questions, but we can give it a few minutes if anyone would like to submit a question right now. This would be on anything that we covered today on this webinar. So I'll give it a few minutes.
Maybe we were just crystal clear, even with some of the technology challenges and the distance being in two different spots. But yeah, we can give it another minute or so to see if anybody has any questions.
Great. Okay, we have questions coming in. Thanks, everyone. Okay. One question we have is, will participants get the chance to attend other Obama Alliance convenings, like in Oakland, Chicago, etc.?
We sure hope so. No guarantees, though, Crystal. But I know we were able to take a pretty strong contingent earlier this year to my MBK Rising in Oakland. I know the Obama Foundation has talked about doing another event in the future, but no guarantees. But we are hopeful.
Okay. Another question we have from April: we're a small mentoring org. Is there a ballpark number of young men of color that this grant should serve?
I'm just going to reference Ray's comment earlier that it's really going to be unique to each organization, and recognizing these are $10,000 12-month grants. You will really have to dictate as the applicant the number of young people that you feel like you can serve. Don't feel like you have to pad the numbers in any way to make it seem more impressive. Be honest, be transparent about the level of support and that you can provide the young people, the mentors. What you don't want to happen is somehow affect the quality of programming that Ray described earlier that we're really looking for. So that's just as best as you it's clear and transparent about how many young people that you can serve at a very high level with these resources.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And I can also just add a little bit to that. So once the selected organizations are identified, there will be learning convenings to build capacity around some best practices of mentoring, as well as some trainings around just kind of how do you assess. Maybe you're a smaller organization and may not have the capacity. There's some assessment tools that we'll also be providing as well. So we want to make sure that you do feel comfortable, and as Matt said, just make sure that you are serving quality programming and mentoring programming. And some, just to kind of just throw out, but this is not limited to, some things to keep in mind is if you are going to be doing, if you are going to be doing mentoring groups, there's a lot of different ways. There's peer-to-peer mentoring, there's one-to-one mentoring, there's 3 to 12 youth mentoring where you have diverse perspectives. There's large group mentoring as teams, as you see, with multiple coaches or multiple mentors and positive relationships. But at the end of the day, we're looking for individuals to create positive and impactful relationships for youth so that they can not only be resilient in some of the things that they face, but they can also encourage and foster the asset-based approach to get what the youth can change in their community and see them as change agents as well. And however number or however you want to create that outcome is totally dependent upon you. And we look forward to seeing some of those written out and outlined in your application.
Okay. And another question. Thank you for this opportunity. We're super excited. Any ideas about funding opportunities for young ladies?
Well, we have a lot of ideas. We just need to secure some additional support. But I know there's a growing movement, that is taking shape here in Sacramento and across the state related to girls and young women of color. And I'm hopeful that we'll see a very similar opportunity in the future. But we can't make any guarantees or any commitments. But I know many of the partners that are in the boys and men of color space are also working in solidarity with other organizations that are working for girls and young women of color. So I'm hopeful in the future we'll see that same level of investment. But we also know that whether it's moms, sisters, other relatives, peers, our boys and young men of color can work in solidarity with our girls and young women of color to support this movement around racial equity. So we're looking forward to that. And I think, as Ray said, there will be a great deal of learning opportunities, and we can talk about how that can happen amongst the cohort of selected grantee partners.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for submitting your questions. We're going to go ahead and close out this webinar. Matt, Ray, any last comments?
I just want to say I appreciate each of you for being on the call. I know we have some amazing change agents that are serving in the leadership capacity, and I know we have some amazing change agents in our young men of color that are waiting to be impacted by you. And we look forward just to hearing from you, changing our communities, as well as giving those opportunities to our youth in Sacramento. So thank you for being on the call.
All right, I'll have a great rest of the week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.